To finish the transgression, Israel had broken God's trust. He entered into the Mosaic covenant with them, and they failed to keep their part. Second, to put an end to sin. Israel failed to live up to what God had wanted them to be, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Third, to atone for iniquity. Israel's history shows a pattern of rejecting the true worship of God and going after other gods, oftentimes becoming worse than the pagan nations around them. Fourth, to bring in everlasting righteousness, the promised messianic kingdom. Fifth, to seal both vision and prophet, that is the redemption of national Israel. And last, and to anoint a most holy place or holy one. This speaks of the messianic temple prophesied in Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48, or the messianic king himself who will rule and reign over the nations with a rod of iron. And so at the conclusion of the 77s, at the conclusion of 490 years, these things will be true for Israel. Daniel is told to know and understand. There's going to be a word, Daniel, that will go out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince. There will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks for a total of 69 of the 70 total decreed for the Jews and for Jerusalem. Now, we know the date from history when the word was given to go and restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And we find it in the scriptures, in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 8, and we covered that last week. Dr. Harold Horner from Dallas Theological Seminary, in his book, The Chronological Aspects of the Life of Christ, finds this date to be March the 5th, 444 BC. Using the Hebrew calendar of 30-day months, 360-day years, as the Bible uses from Genesis to Revelation, accounting for leap years, centennial years, where there is no leap year, and the transition from BC to AD, where there is no zero, you come to the date March 30th, 33 AD. And that is exactly 173,880 days, or 483 years. Now, in the Hebrew calendar, as we looked at last week, this fell on the 10th of Nisan, that is the 10th day of the first month of the Jewish year, which is the Passover Lamb Selection Day. And on that very day, Jesus presented himself to Jerusalem as her king. In Luke 19, we read, as Jesus, he, was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And Zechariah 9:9, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt the foal of a donkey." Back to Luke. "And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, rebuke your disciples.' He answered, 'I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out.'" I mean, the religious leaders could see the fulfillment of the scriptures before their very eyes, and yet they chose to reject Jesus as Messiah. Jesus, I believe, looked to the city of Jerusalem and its walls and said, even the rocks would cry out if they were to be silent. They were given a divine countdown. Know therefore and understand. Notice what Jesus says. "And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, 'Would that you, even you, had' what? Known on this day the things that make for peace, but now are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation." Jesus holds them accountable. They should have known. They had no excuse not to know. Jesus prophesies, "For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you. They will surround you, hem you in on every side, and tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you, and they will not leave one stone upon another in you." Why? Because you did not know the time of your visitation. He holds them accountable, doesn't he? You should have known. I mean, how much more obvious does the Lord have to be than to give them a prophetic countdown to the very day. I mean, they could have had a literal clock in the temple going, how many days until the Messiah comes? 5 more days, actually. Wow, 5 days. I wonder who it's going to be. I mean, they could have had a countdown. And then here comes Jesus riding on a donkey, fulfilling Zechariah 9:9. They're going, oh, wow, look at this. Instead, they realized it. They understood it. They didn't even have the clock counting down, but they understood what they were seeing with their own eyes. And they decided, they chose in their own hearts to reject Jesus. And in Matthew 23, Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate, for I tell you, will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." The next time you get into a discussion with someone who is perhaps anti-Semitic and they claim to be a believer, remind them that the second coming of Christ will not happen until the Jews call out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. It's really amazing. The kingdom was offered to them. Here was their king, and they rejected him and the kingdom, just as the scriptures had foretold. Psalm 118:22, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Now Jesus told the Jews, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. He will not come until they recognize that he is their Messiah. Now, Jesus then entered his Father's house, the temple. He was examined by the religious leaders. They tried every trick in the book to trap him, and in every instance, Jesus came out unscathed. He was without spot or blemish. There was no sin that they could convict him of because he was sinless. And on the 14th of Nisan at 3 p.m., the Jews began to sacrifice their Passover lambs, and at 3 p.m., the scriptures tell us, Jesus said, it is finished. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And he died. As the Apostle Paul would write to the Corinthians, for Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Jesus, who was born where all Passover lambs were born, was killed where all Passover lambs were killed. Just as Daniel had written, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, fulfilling the words of Jesus to Pilate. Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not from the world. Now what happens after the anointed one, the prince, is cut off, according to the book of Daniel? Well, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. This is a second prince. And his people will destroy the city of Jerusalem and also the rebuilt temple. I mean, how's that for Daniel? The temple at that very moment was laying in ruins back there in Jerusalem. And now he gets insight that there's going to be a rebuilt temple, a rebuilt sanctuary, and also that it's going to be destroyed. I mean, talk about an up and down experience. You know, hey, Daniel, there's going to be another temple. Oh, wow, right on. And it's going to be destroyed. Oh, bummer, you know. And then it's going to be rebuilt again. There's even a third one that we can see in Daniel chapter 9. Now, during the final week, before Jesus went to the cross, he and his disciples would spend their day in the temple. He would be teaching. And then at night, do you remember what they would do? They would withdraw back to the Mount of Olives. And they were staying there in the Mount of Olives. And on one particular day, we read in Matthew 24, Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. At that point, they were still being constructed. The building project wasn't done yet. But he answered them, you see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Now, this was the second time Jesus had said this. We read it earlier in Luke. Twice now he has said that there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Now, there are 3 questions that the disciples now will ask. Matthew 24:3. As he sat down on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? In Mark, we're told that it was Peter, Andrew, James, and John that came and asked Jesus these three questions. When will these things be? That is in relation to the destruction of the temple and the city of Jerusalem. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, we must remember that in their mind, they still didn't have clarity on the two comings of the Messiah. Jesus was about to go to the cross, which was the mission of his first coming, and the disciples were about to be scattered. They didn't know it right then, but what they were asking Jesus was, what will be the sign of your second coming? They didn't have that in their mind yet. I mean, they were still expecting the kingdom when? Now, then, right? They were saying, well, they were still fighting. Remember, later on that week, they're going to celebrate Passover together, and what? The disciples are going to be fighting amongst each other. Who is going to be the greatest in the kingdom? I mean, they still didn't understand the two aspects, the two comings of the Messiah. And so what they were really asking in these questions were this. First, when will the sign of the coming destruction, what will be the sign of the coming destruction of the temple? Two, what will be the sign of the end of the age? Remembering that they understood the ages to be split into two, the present age and the age to come. That is the Messianic age. And then third, what will be the sign of your coming, the second coming? Okay. The first, what will be the sign of the coming destruction of the temple in Jerusalem? Two, what will be the sign of the end of the age? And three, what will be the sign of your coming, your second coming? Now, Jesus will begin to answer it, and he begins by giving some general characteristics of the church age. Matthew 24, 4 through 6. And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet." And so Jesus tells them, look, in the future there are going to be false messiahs, false Christs that come saying, "I'm the Christ." And historically, we can see that. After Jesus, there are others who would claim to be messiahs. For instance, Bar Kokhba was one of them, a false messiah. And there were false messiahs before Jesus as well. And so Jesus warns them about that. And second, he tells them about local wars, the existence of local wars and rumors of wars. And he says, "See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet." So he says, this isn't a sign of the end. And right away, you can tell that he's not answering them in sequence, right? He's just doing what they used to do. Here we go, no, tackle question one first. He doesn't do that. He says, listen, this is just going to be general characteristics of the church age. There may be those who claim to be false messiahs, and there are going to be local wars. There are going to be rumors of wars, local wars. Don't let that scare you. The end is not yet. Luke 21:9 says, "And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once." Jesus now really begins to answer the third question. What will be the sign that the end of the age has begun? In verses 7 and 8 of Matthew 24. "For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains." Now, when Jesus said, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom," he used a well-known Jewish idiom which meant a world war. He used a well-known Jewish idiom that meant a world war. One Jewish source, known as the Bereshit Rabbah, states, "If you shall see the kingdoms rising against each other in turn, then give heed and note the footsteps of the Messiah." The rabbis taught that a world war would signal the coming of the Messiah. Now here Jesus corrects this idea. A world war isn't the sign of the coming of Messiah, but rather that the end of the age has begun. You see that? What's going to be the sign of the end of the age? How will we know when it's beginning? And he says there will be a world war. Now, World War I was the fulfillment of this prophecy, and World War II as most historians would agree, was just a continuation of World War I. And if you know history, you know that to be true. World War I, ... World War II, same war, the same Great War, if you will. When we look at the results of the Second World War, we see that God used the wrath that was shown against the Jewish people by the Third Reich. He used that to gain worldwide sympathy for the Jewish people, which allowed them to return to the land. It enabled the creation of the modern state of Israel. It's important to note that the scriptures clearly teach that Israel would come back into the land in a state of unbelief. It's very fascinating to me that a sign that we have entered into, if you will, the end of the age, brought about God's clock, his prophetic clock, Israel. And you guys know this. You guys are Bible prophecy nerds. You know that to look to Israel is God's prophetic clock. And it happens to coincide with that of a world war, just as Jesus told us 2,000 years ago. Now in Ezekiel chapter 20, you guys already know Ezekiel 36 and 37, so I want to bring on another passage that perhaps you don't know as well. Ezekiel chapter 20, beginning in verse 33 says, "As I live, declares the Lord God, surely with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out, I will be king over you. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you are scattered, with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and with wrath poured out. And I'll bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face. As I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, declares the Lord God. I will make you pass under the rod," that is the shepherd's rod, "and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant," speaking of the new covenant, Jeremiah 31. "I will purge out the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. I will bring them out of the land where they sojourn, but they shall not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord." This is a fascinating passage. Why? Because we see that there was wrath poured out on the Jews, on the house of Israel that has been scattered amongst the nations. There would be wrath poured out on them, and from this wrath God would bring out his people, and he would bring them back into the land in a state of unbelief where there are rebels that need to be purged, and for the purpose of what? Of entering into judgment with them. So the people would have wrath poured out on them, the Holocaust, World War II, the Third Reich, Nazi Germany, and having endured that wrath, God brings them out now to enter into judgment with them, which is the time of Jacob's trouble or Daniel's 70th 7. Are you guys following with me? It's a very important passage. It's an incredible passage, really. Now, you remember that the people that came out of Egypt back during the Exodus, when they came up to the promised land, they failed to enter in. Why? Because of unbelief, disobedience. They rebelled against the Lord, and he entered into judgment with them. You remember 10 of the 12 spies had a bad report, and with the judgment, those 10 spies were immediately cut down. They were killed by the Lord. He did not like what they did. And then the rest of the generation that had rebelled, they died in the wilderness minus 2 guys. You guys know who they are? Joshua and Caleb. Okay? And then Joshua and Caleb led in an entirely new group of people into the promised land. 40 years passed by. And so the same thing is seen here. The people that come out of the nations, those who have unbelief, the rebels, if you will, God is going to purge them during the time of Jacob's trouble or Daniel's 70th 7. And only the remnant will actually inherit the land and come under, really, the new covenant, Jeremiah 31, under the reign of Jesus as Messiah. In Zechariah 13, it says, "In the whole land, declares the Lord, 2/3 shall be cut off and perish, and 1/3 shall be left alive. And I will put this third into the fire, and refine them as one refines silver, and test them as gold is tested. They will call upon my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God." Joel chapter 2 tells us they will call upon the name of the Lord and be saved. Paul tells us in Romans chapter 10, verses 9 and 10, that it is the name of Jesus that they must call upon, as well as Acts chapter 4, verse 12. Only those who are saved by faith in Jesus Christ will enter into the Messianic kingdom. Those are the ones who will look upon him whom they had pierced, and they will say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And Jesus will come. Is that not cool? Super cool. And like I said, I wanted to go to Ezekiel 20 because not many people know about that passage of Scripture, and there are others as well. Ezekiel 36 and 37, it's well-known ground. Now, it must be said here something about the rapture. It's important to remember that the rapture is an imminent event that requires no signs to precede it. It could have occurred, at any time. From the beginning of the church until now. The rapture can happen at any moment. It could have happened before the Great War. It could have. It can happen right now. We wouldn't have to drive home in the snow. It could happen right now. Okay? There are no signs required. Nothing prophetically speaking that must be fulfilled before Jesus can return for his bride. There are a lot of things that have to be fulfilled before he can come back at his second coming. Now, in Luke chapter 21, remember that Matthew 24, 25, Luke 21, and Mark 13 compose what is known as the Olivet Discourse. Okay? And you need all three in order to fully understand the answers that Jesus gives. He now goes on to personal experiences of the apostles, Luke chapter 21, 12 through 19. But before all this, if you like to take notes, you got to write that, make note of that. But before all this, because that's different than what is recorded in Matthew. Okay? But before all this, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons, and you'll be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. Settle it therefore in your minds, not to meditate beforehand how to answer, for I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you they will put to death. You'll be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your lives. Who are the four guys who Jesus is talking to? Do you remember? Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Who is the first out of those four to be put to death? Do you remember? James with Herod, right? Peter will later die. John is the only one that doesn't. Andrew, according to church history, also would die for his faith. So 3 out of the 4 guys, they die. He says, by your endurance you will gain your lives. Now, this describes the experiences of the apostles and that of the early church. A quick note here. Jesus said, I have said these things to you that in me you may know, that you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Now, speaking to folks who would disagree, from either camp, those who would say that there is no pre-tribulation rapture, that it's one of the other options, or that everything's been fulfilled, they're a partial preterists, they would say, you guys just want to escape. You just want to escape tribulation. Have you ever heard that before? You know, you're escapists. And I look at them and I say, are you a Christian? And they say, well, yeah, I am. And so I say, you're an escapist. We've escaped the wrath of God to come in hell. That's what you deserved. We've escaped that through the cross. We're all escapists. We all want to not get what we deserve. And so I look at them, I say, listen, I get it. I understand what you're trying to say, but it holds no water. I agree with them that we will endure tribulation, but we will not endure the tribulation period. Every single one of us here is going to endure tribulation. I mean, if you haven't yet, Jesus said you will. So be prepared. You will experience tribulation. But take heart, I've overcome the world. But you will not go through the tribulation. You will not go through the 70th 7 of Daniel. Now, Ephesians 5:6. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. 1 Thessalonians 1:10. And to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus who delivers us from the wrath to come. And I swapped this out on you, Dave, so I apologize. But Revelation 3:10, because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world to try those who dwell on the earth. Now, we have a blessed hope, the blessed hope, that Jesus is coming to return for his bride before the wrath of God, and the Lamb is poured out on a Christ-rejecting world. Now, Jesus answers the disciples' question about the sign of the fall of Jerusalem, and it's recorded only in Luke. It is recorded only in Luke, chapter 21, verses 20 through 24. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, and just a quick note, notice that there is no mention of the abomination of desolation here. No note of it whatsoever. And that is how we know that Jesus is answering the question concerning the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem. He's not talking about latter events during the tribulation period. He's just talking about the fulfillment and the sign for the fall of Jerusalem. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let not those who are out in the country enter it. For these are days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. For there will be great distress upon the earth, and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led captive among all nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Number one, Jerusalem will be surrounded by armies. 2, when they saw this, they were to run for the hills. 3, Jerusalem will be trampled down underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. The times of the Gentiles began when? Began with the first siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. 605, 606. Some will push it back to 608, 609, when the Babylonians. 609 is the fall of the Assyrians. 612, the fall of Nineveh. 3 years later, the rest of Assyria fell. Okay, and so then Babylon was really the top dog, if you will. And so some would put 609 as the time when the time of the Gentiles began, but the first siege will do. The times of the Gentiles will continue right up until Jesus returns at his second coming. The times of the Gentiles will continue all the way through present day until Jesus returns. Now, in 66 AD, the city of Jerusalem was surrounded by the Romans. The Roman general was Cestus Gallus. I always love their names. They always sound so cool. Cestus Gallus. The city was totally encircled. And the believers, the Jewish believers inside Jerusalem, they were trapped. They were trapped inside. But then Gallus noticed that his supply lines were not secure and that he wouldn't have enough supplies to maintain the siege. And if you know anything about ancient sieges, it was really a matter of who would run out of supplies first, the defenders on the inside or those around them. And historically speaking, many times the camp outside, the besieging army, they were in just as dire straits as the people inside. Plague, dysentery, everything just running rampant within, the camp of the besiegers. It would often be awful. And that's why when finally the defenders would give up, or, the doors would come open and the defenders would rush out, and they would just come in and they would just do all the things that they would do. There's a reason. They were angry. Like, you guys made us wait for 3 years out here. And anyhow, so Gallus, he had to go back. He had to lift the siege and go back to Caesarea, which was the headquarters there of Rome in that area. And so when the siege was lifted, the believers in Jerusalem, they packed their bags and they got out of Dodge. And they crossed over the River Jordan, and they went to a small town called Pella in Transjordan, and they were soon joined by believers from Judea, Galilee, and the Golan. Now, Cestus Gallus, en route to Caesarea, he was actually ambushed by Jewish rebels and killed. And Vespasian, who was then a Roman general, was sent to Judea with his son, Titus. And in 69, Vespasian, he became the emperor, and he then gave and entrusted the final campaign against Jerusalem to his son, Titus. Titus began his siege of Jerusalem in April of 70 AD. By August, the defenses of the city had fallen, and on the 10th of August, the temple was set ablaze against his orders. He wanted the temple to remain as a trophy. However, because of the fire, the gold in the temple melted. It went in between the cracks. You guys know the story. And in order to get all of the gold out, Titus ordered his legions, I believe there were 5 legions in total that were there, to dismantle the whole temple complex, throwing all the stones off the side of the Temple Mount in order to retrieve the gold. And if you go to Jerusalem today, you will find the stones of the Second Temple on a 1st century road. You can go there, you can see it. It's awesome. Because, you go there and you touch it and you go, these are the stones that Jesus was looking at across the Kidron Valley from the Mount of Olives, looking into Jerusalem. You kind of like, wow, you kind of touch it and you're like, wow, this is so cool. How awesome is this? Now, if fulfilled the words of Christ, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Now, Daniel 9:26, and after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off, and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. So Messiah comes, he'll be cut off, he'll be killed, he'll have nothing. There's no kingdom at this time. 2, Jerusalem and the temple will be destroyed by the people of the prince who is to come. And 3, there will be wars until the very end, and desolations are decreed. Is that true of that area from 70 until the present day? Are there wars in that area? Yes. There are lots of wars. Okay? Wars are decreed. They're going to happen. Now, one of the most significant elements within this prophecy is actually for the non-believing Jew today, those who have rejected Jesus as Messiah. Why? Because they have to come to terms with Daniel chapter 9. You see, there is a small window from March 30th, 33 AD until August 10th, 70 AD, where their Messiah had to have come and die. You follow me? This is so important. A short 37-year window, a red zone, if you will, where the Messiah had to have come and die, according to Daniel 9. And so for the non-believing Jew, take them to Romans, take them to Daniel 9. Your Messiah had to have come in these 37 years. So if it's not Jesus, who is it? When the rabbis today say, when Messiah comes, we'll check his passport to see if he's been here before, it's total foolishness. According to the scriptures, he has to have already come. And so the next time you get to have a discussion with a non-believing Jew today, take them there. It's indisputable. It's indisputable. Prior to Daniel's 70th 7, there will be a number of events that will take place. 3 have already happened. The first is the Great War, World War I and the continuation of World War II. The second is the establishment of Israel, May 14th, 1948. And the third one is that Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, must be under Jewish control. And that happened in 1967 during the 6-Day War. You see, the Jews have to have control over the old city of Jerusalem in order for the future events of the tribulation period to occur. Now, the next ones, they are yet future. They have not happened yet. Number 4, Gog and Magog, the invasion from the north. There is an in-house debate amongst dispensationalists on the exact timing of this invasion, but it would seem to indicate from the text that it will occur before the start of the tribulation period, because you have to allow for time for the burial as well as for 7 years of the burning of weapons. And so I think the idea and the interpretation that makes the most sense, at least to me, is that it must take place 3.5 years before the start of the tribulation period. And that makes sense. Because how are they going to burn the weapons when they're on the run for the latter half of the tribulation period? They can't. Right? Now, as I said, it's an in-house debate. But if it is that timeline, that the 7 years burning and 7 months for waiting to bury would place it more than 3.5 years before the start of the tribulation period. Next, number 5, is a one world government. That occurs before the tribulation. A one world government. And number 6, a 10 kingdom stage. That follows a one world government. And that is before the tribulation period begins. We've studied already in Daniel that there will be 4 kingdoms of man that will come one after another, beginning with the first during the time of Daniel and ending with the 4th when the Ancient of Days, the Son of Man, the Messiah, will come and establish his everlasting kingdom, which is the 5th kingdom. Now, I call them kingdoms 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and I'm not trying to be boring. I'm just trying to keep us from making any errors or confusion. Because when you start placing the names to them, which we're about to do, and you don't start with just kingdoms 1 through 5, you can actually make some very small mistakes. And it's kind of like that algebra analogy. If you have an error up here, it'll go all the way down. Now, the first kingdom is obvious. It's given to us in the text. It's Babylon. Chapter 2, the head of gold. Chapter 7, the lion with the 2 wings of an eagle that are plucked off. It's back, and it's made to stand like a man, and it's given the mind of a man, being a picture of King Nebuchadnezzar and his judgment and redemption. We studied that in Daniel chapter 4. Instrument of judgment against Judah because of their sin. The second kingdom, the Medes and Persians. Chapter 2, the 2 arms of silver joined by the chest to make a single kingdom. Chapters 7 and 8, the bear raised on one side and a ram with 2 horns, the greater of the 2 coming up last, showing us the power disparity between the Medes and Persians, with the Persians being the younger and stronger of the 2. The 3 ribs in the bear's mouth, and the directions of the charging ram being west, north, and south, signifying the 3 powers that the Medes and the Persians defeated: Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt, west, north, and south. The fact that east is not mentioned is important. Why? Because the Persians and Medes made no significant conquest east. That's where they came from. The Medes and Persians served as God's instrument of judgment against Babylon because of their cruelty shown against Judah. And they also allowed the Jews to return to their land to rebuild and restore Jerusalem and the sanctuary. And we studied that. Cyrus the Great. He allowed the repatriation of conquered peoples to go back to their native land. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, they would take people out. The Persians, they let people go back. The third kingdom, the Greek kingdom, specifically the Macedonian kingdom, or the Hellenic kingdom. Chapter 2, the belly and thighs of bronze. Chapter 7, the leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. Unlike the bear, which was a slow-moving juggernaut, crushing its foes with brute strength through numbers, the leopard was much more agile and quick. Chapter 8 gives us insight into that. The goat with 1 prominent horn, representing its first king, Alexander the Great. He charged at the ram, the Medes and Persians, and in 3 short years, he defeated them with a much smaller force. Depending on the historical records, the Persian forces amounted over 100,000, sometimes up to even 200,000. And the Greeks, much smaller, between 40 to 60,000. And so a much smaller force, but much better trained with better equipment. I mean, the Companion cavalry, they did incredible damage, as well as the phalanx. And we went over that back in chapter 8. Now, Alexander died at the height of his power in the city of Babylon at the age of 32. And just like in chapter 8, the horn on the goat was broken at the height of its power, and 4 other horns came from the one. Just as there were 4 heads on the leopard, it signified the 4 kingdoms that arose out of Alexander's. Now they're still within this third kingdom. Okay, they're still within the third kingdom, the Hellenic kingdom. They were still Greeks. Now, 2 of them play a very significant role in the history of Israel, and that is of Syria and Egypt, the Ptolemies in Egypt, and the Seleucids in Syria. And in particular, a little horn that came out of one of the other 4 horns, Antiochus IV, a king from the Seleucid kingdom. Are you guys still tracking with me? Okay, good. Antiochus is important because he is really a forerunner, if you will, a type of the Antichrist. He's called a little horn in chapter 8, but he's not the same little horn of chapter 7. We know that why? Because the chapter 7 little horn is from the fourth kingdom. The little horn of chapter 8 is from the third. Two different kingdoms, two different guys. But when you look at what the little horn in chapters 7 and 8 do, they are very similar. Very similar. Now, Antiochus IV fulfilled what was written about him in chapter 8 from 167 BC to 164 BC. The third kingdom plays two very important roles. First, they spread Hellenism throughout their kingdom, giving everyone a common language, both spoken and written. This would play a significant role in the spreading of the gospel. They also translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and we still have it to this day. It's called the Septuagint. Second, Antiochus IV serves as a type for the Antichrist. And he does many of the same things that the future Antichrist will do. And the Lord has providentially been preparing Israel, even in their unbelief, for the coming little horn, the coming Antichrist. How is that? Well, for over 2,000 years, the Jews have been celebrating Hanukkah. They've been celebrating Hanukkah, the feast of dedication, where they remember a madman that came into the temple, had pigs slaughtered on the altar, forbid their worship of the true God, and then they rebelled and fought against them. And they've been celebrating that for over 2,000 years. I mean, think about the love and the mercy of God for Israel. He's been providentially preparing them for that future event where the Antichrist will do the same. Now, the fourth kingdom. The fourth kingdom is the one that Daniel took very peculiar or particular interest in because it was different than all the rest. The first kingdom, easy, Babylon. The second kingdom, the Medes and Persians, a little more complexity. The third kingdom, the Hellenic kingdom, there's a little more complexity with, Alexander dying and then 4 kingdoms within the kingdom coming up. There's more moving parts, but the fourth kingdom takes the cake. I mean, it is different than all the rest. This is by far the most complicated kingdom of the 4. Because it is complicated, we oftentimes try and simplify it for people, especially when they might be new to biblical prophecy. Now, the reason I use the word kingdoms is because that's what the Lord calls them back in Daniel chapter 2. When we come to the fourth kingdom, it's important that when we say Rome, that we don't pigeonhole it to just Rome and revived Rome. Why? Because there are really 5 stages in this fourth kingdom. I usually simplify it to 2, but because you guys are here tonight, we'll go into all 5. Okay? Into all 5. The fourth kingdom, like the third kingdom, it could be called the Hellenic. You could call the fourth kingdom the imperialistic kingdom, beginning with imperial Rome under Augustus Caesar. Now, we won't get into Revelation chapter 17 and the different stages of the governments of Rome. You're welcome. But when it comes to imperial Rome, beginning with Augustus Caesar, he's the first emperor. He's the first emperor, and he avoids kings, because they had kings at the very, very beginning of the Roman kingdom, if you will, and they had multiple different changes. He avoided that at all costs. But he was given the name Augustus. Do you guys remember what his name was from history? I actually prefer it. Octavian. I think that's a really cool name. But, Augustus. He was given Caesar Augustus. And he's the first emperor of Rome, imperial Rome, if you will. Chapter 2, the legs of iron represent this stage of imperial Rome, the iron. Note, the Greeks gave the world a common language. The Romans gave the world peace through Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. With Augustus Caesar, there began 200 years of peace and stability. There were 2 more things that the Romans brought in. Roman roads, the best in the world, maybe even the best in the world today. They were awesome. And then third, was their postal system. In fact, it was brought in around the time of Augustus. He brought in an amazing postal service. It would even rival Canada Post today. They never went on strike. Something bad would happen to them. And so with all those things, so you had a common language, both spoken and written. You had the peace of Rome. You had a Roman road system. And then you also had a postal service. I mean, when Jesus came, he truly came in the fullness of time. He truly came at the most opportune time for him to come, complete his ministry, complete his mission, going to the cross, and then rising from the dead on the third day, and then the gospel going out. I mean, if you were a Greek, you could have the Hebrew scriptures because it had been translated into Greek from Hebrew and Aramaic. It was the perfect time. It's so awesome. Now, the second of 5 stages in the fourth kingdom is the divided stage. Rome was divided east and west, and we're going to go into a little more detail here because I think it's really interesting, and I know you guys love when I get into historical things. Some of you. The Roman Empire divided into east and west a couple different times in their history, but the division became permanent in 395 AD following the death of Emperor Theodosius I. The Western Roman Empire subsequently weakened. It eventually fell in 476 AD, while the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued until 1453 AD. Now in the West, in 732 AD, and you should know this date, Charles Martel led the Franks to victory over the invading Muslim forces at the Battle of Tours, saving Europe from Islam. Charles Martel was the grandfather of a man named Charlemagne, who in 800 AD was crowned Emperor of the Romans in Rome by Pope Leo III. In documents, Charlemagne used Emperor Augustus governing the Roman Empire as his signature, ruler of the Franks. He called his empire Romanum Imperium, which was really the continuation of Western Roman power in Europe after the fall of the Western Rome in Rome, the actual peninsula there. Now, the eastern side, they never acknowledged them as being Roman, and they weren't really Roman, although the power had moved there with Charlemagne. Now, in the 12th century, the Holy Roman Empire came on the scene. As most historians would say, it was neither Roman nor holy. The king was called the Emperor of the Romans, ever Augustus. And so the Holy Roman Empire was really the area of Germany, but not as we know it today. It was an amalgamation of all sorts of different tribes and different kingdoms, all within the Holy Roman Empire. Now, in 1476, after the fall of Constantinople, the orphan niece of Constantine, her name was Sophie, the last Byzantine emperor, she married Ivan the Great, or Ivan III of Moscow. And his grandson, Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible, would become the first Tsar of Russia. Now, the word Tsar is derived from the Latin for, any guesses? Caesar. Yeah. Caesar. So when you read about, Tsar Alexander, Caesar Alexander in Latin. Now, in the West, with the Holy Roman Empire, the German king was called Kaiser. And you guessed it, it is derived from the Latin for Caesar. And so you have Caesars in the West, and Caesars in the East. In chapter 2 of Daniel, 395 AD, Rome was officially divided east and west, represented by the two legs. This east-west balance of power is where we are today in the timeline. Western power, Eastern power. You guys turn on the news and you can see it as plain as day today. Western power and the Eastern power. Now, the following 3 stages within the fourth kingdom are all future. Number 3, a one-world government. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. Thus he said, "As for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces." The Roman Empire never did this. In fact, there has been no empire, no kingdom on earth that has ever trampled down the whole earth. and yet they will happen in the future. There will be a one-world government. The fourth kingdom will dominate, trample, devour the whole earth, and it has not happened. It will then lead to the fourth stage, which is the 10 kingdom stage. You remember from Daniel chapter 24, verse 24a. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise. Chapters 2 and 7, the 10 toes or the 10 horns are 10 kings, which will be overseeing 10 kingdoms. And it will come after the one world government. And then fifth, the final stage is Daniel 7:24b. And another shall arise after them, that's an 11th horn. He shall be different from the former ones and shall put down 3 kings. This is the Antichrist stage. Okay? So within the fourth kingdom, there are 5 stages. Imperial Rome, the divided stage, one world government, 10-toe, 10-king stage, and then the Antichrist stage. You guys following with me? You guys are experts. Now the prince who is to come, Daniel 9:27, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Who is this? Well, he is the seed of Satan, Genesis 3:15. The little horn, Daniel 7:8. The prince who is to come, Daniel 9:26. The one who makes desolate, Daniel 9:27. The willful king, Daniel 11:36. The man of sin, 2 Thessalonians 2:3. The son of perdition, 2 Thessalonians 2:3. The lawless one, 2 Thessalonians 2:8. The Antichrist, 1 John 2:22. And the beast, Revelation 11:7. The final week begins when the Antichrist makes a covenant with Israel. It is a known 7-year period. Now, the Antichrist can only come on the scene because Jesus has allowed him to. In Revelation chapter 6, we read, "Now I watched when the Lamb opened one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, 'Come!' And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer." We know that this is the Antichrist because he appears at the beginning of the tribulation period. He wears a victor's crown, or a crown of the overcomer. It's Stephanos in the Greek, compared to the true Messiah who will appear in Revelation chapter 19, also on a white horse. But Jesus comes wearing the crown of sovereignty, that is a diadem, or the crown of royalty. Now the Antichrist will remove 3 of the 10 kings. And then Jesus begins to go into the great tribulation period in Matthew 24:9. Then, and notice, then. It is different than in Luke when he says, but before all this. But before all this goes to things that precede what Luke was describing. Then describes now what will come after. Okay? Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death. And you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. Okay? So the word then, it's an important one. Though the content is similar to Mark 13, 9 through 13, and Luke 21, 12 through 19, those passages begin with but and before all this, telling us that what was being described happens before the sign of the end of the age. Therefore, what Jesus is describing in Matthew takes place after the world war prophecy Jesus prophesied earlier. There are 5 events that Jesus describes in the first half of the tribulation period. Number 1, persecution of believers. Why? Well, because of the one world religious system, the ecclesiastical system that will be put in place. 2, many false prophets will arise, including the false prophet. Number 3, lawlessness will increase because he and what restrains the church and the Holy Spirit who indwells the church will have been removed prior to the beginning of the tribulation period by way of the rapture. 4, those who endure to the end will be saved. That is, at that time, all of Israel will have repented and turned to Jesus, a national revival, fulfilling the prophets that the rebels will be purged and the remnant purified. Number 5, worldwide preaching of the gospel. This is started by the coming of Elijah. Now, again, within the family, there are debates over who the two witnesses are. Some would say it's going to be Elijah. He is prophesied in Malachi chapter 4 that he will come before the Messiah comes. And so John was a forerunner. He fulfilled Malachi chapter 3 as the messenger being sent before, the forerunner. And he was a type, if you will, of chapter 4 of Malachi. There are some who would debate that there will come Elijah, but he's not actually one of the two witnesses. And that the two witnesses, we just don't know who they are. And it's just all fun and games, really, for us to speculate because we're not told. And anyone who says, I know for sure who the two witnesses are, they're not lying to you, but they have a little overconfidence because it just says the two witnesses. Okay? Now, we know that Elijah will come before, that the two witnesses will be sharing the gospel, and it will bring 144,000 of the house of Israel to salvation, 12,000 from each of the tribes. And from the witness of the two witnesses and the 144,000, there will be a multitude of Gentiles brought to saving faith. Now, the two witnesses appear day one in Jerusalem, and their ministry will continue for 1,260 days, according to Revelation chapter 11. And it will bring us to the middle of the tribulation period. And for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. This is the second half. It begins in the middle. Matthew 24, 15 through 28. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight may not be in winter on a Sabbath, for then there will be a great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now. No, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, look, he is in the wilderness, do not go out. If they say, look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. The second half of the tribulation period begins with many events taking place at the halfway mark. The abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel. In heaven, Satan with his angels will have fought against Michael and his angels, and they will have lost, and they will be thrown to the earth. Revelation 12:12 says, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. He only has 3.5 years left. The Antichrist will come to Jerusalem at the midpoint and kill the two witnesses. In 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4, it says, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. And in Revelation 13, it says, and the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months, 3.5 years. Or 1,260 days. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. Sounds familiar from Daniel. And authority was given over it, over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written. And I think it still says before, which is an error in the translation. It should be from. The new ESV 2025 has corrected that error. From the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. Satan then will launch the greatest attack against the Jewish people that has ever been seen. Believing Jew or unbelieving, doesn't matter. Satan hates the Jewish people because from them came the seed, the Messiah. It goes all the way back to the first prophecy concerning the Messiah. It also has to do with the Antichrist. Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Who is the offspring of Satan? It's going to be the Antichrist, the unholy Trinity. Satan operates as the Father, the Antichrist as the Son, and the false prophet as the Holy Spirit. Satan will give to his Son, if you will, all of his authority, just as the Father gave to the Son his authority. And the false prophet will command the whole world to worship the Antichrist, just as the Holy Spirit commands and convicts the whole world to worship the true Son, the unholy Trinity. We're almost done. Persecution against believers at that time will be unparalleled, and Israel will go through the fire. 2/3 will perish, 1/3 will be saved, the remnant. Now the sign of the second coming of the Messiah, Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Luke 21, and there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations and perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. I always love this from the Olivet Discourse. The Lord is going to turn off the lights before he comes. He's going to turn out the lights. Sun, the moon, the stars, they will not give their light. It's going to be complete darkness. And then the Shekinah glory of God is going to come forth when heaven is opened and the rider on the white horse, Jesus, appears. It's just one of my favorite pictures in my mind. It's so cool. When the lights go out, the anticipation of what's about to come will build. Luke tells us that people will faint with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. And so in summary, when will the sign of the coming destruction, what will be the sign of the coming destruction of the temple? Armies surrounding the city. What will be the sign of the coming of the end of the age? A world war. What will be the sign of the second coming? Well, the coming of the Son of Man in a cloud with power and great glory, breaking through the total blackout. And in Luke 21:28, now when these things begin to take place, straighten up, raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. This will be extremely relevant to those during the tribulation period, that Jesus is coming and the tribulation period will not last forever. But for the church today, how applicable are these words now? We can see the stage is being set, the actors are getting into place, the props are where they need to be. There's nothing that needs to be fulfilled in order for Jesus to return for his church. Therefore, the anticipation of the rapture should only be building within our lives with every passing moment. The Spirit and the bride say, "Come, Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus." Shall we pray?